For more than 20 years, every woman who entered Grace Whitmore's home lost something she could not easily explain. Not immediately. That was what made it frightening. Nothing dramatic happened on the first day. There were no slammed doors, no screaming matches, no cruel insults sharp enough to leave visible wounds. Visitors entered Grace's home and saw warmth, order, stability. A woman who kept fresh flowers near the dining room window and folded kitchen towels with perfect corners. They saw a widow who had raised 4 sons alone after tragedy reshaped her life too early. They saw family dinners every Sunday and holiday photographs arranged carefully along the hallway wall. From the outside, Grace Whitmore looked like the kind of woman people trusted. And perhaps that was the reason nobody noticed what happened inside that house until it was already too late. The first daughter-in-law arrived laughing. Amanda's laughter had once been impossible to ignore. It rolled through rooms easily, warm and alive, the kind of laugh that made strangers smile before they even knew what the joke was. Before marriage, she had built a growing event planning business from almost nothing. She carried color swatches in her handbag. Her phone rang constantly with clients asking for her ideas. She could transform an empty hall into something beautiful with flowers, candles, and sheer determination. The day she married Grace's oldest son, Daniel, she danced so hard at the reception that her shoes nearly broke. People remembered her because she made rooms feel brighter. A year later, she barely spoke above a whisper. Then came Rebecca. Rebecca was different from Amanda in almost every way. Structured, analytical, sharp. She had spent years studying law and carried herself like a woman who believed problems could be solved if people were simply honest enough to address them directly. She believed in communication, boundaries, clarity. The house changed her too. Not all at once. That was the strange thing. Nothing inside Grace Whitmore's world ever happened quickly enough to alarm people. It happened slowly, like fog settling over glass. Then there was Lauren. Lauren entered the family believing she understood exactly who Grace was. She had watched Amanda grow quieter over the years. She had noticed Rebecca's confidence thinning around the edges. She saw enough to understand there was a pattern inside that house. So Lauren made a decision before marriage. She would not resist Grace. She would become close to her instead. For a while, it seemed like the smartest decision anyone had made. Grace called her my daughter almost immediately. She invited Lauren shopping, shared recipes, told emotional stories about raising 4 boys alone after losing her husband too early. Lauren felt chosen, trusted, included. By the 3rd year of marriage, Lauren no longer knew where Grace's opinions ended and her own began. And then Claire entered the house. And for the first time in 20 years, something failed. Grace Whitmore was never the kind of woman people feared openly. That was what made her influence difficult to explain. She did not shout. She did not insult people. She did not humiliate anyone publicly. Instead, Grace specialized in something far quieter. She rearranged people. When her husband died suddenly at 43, neighbors admired the way she held herself together. For boys, 1 mortgage, 1 house full of grief. Most people assumed the family would fall apart after the funeral. Instead, Grace tightened her grip on every part of the household. Dinner happened at the same time every evening. Every holiday followed the exact same structure. Every son called before making major decisions. Every family disagreement somehow ended with Grace sitting silently at the center while everyone else adjusted themselves around her. At first, people mistook this for strength. Maybe it was. But strength can become something else when it is built entirely around control. Visitors often described Grace as composed, admirable, devoted, and in many ways she truly was. The house remained spotless. Birthdays were never forgotten. No child ever arrived at school without lunch. No holiday passed without gifts wrapped carefully in ribbon. Grace loved her family deeply, but over the years, Love inside that house became tangled together with obedience so tightly that nobody could separate the two anymore. Amanda noticed the changes first in the kitchen. At the beginning, Grace behaved warmly toward her. She praised Amanda's cooking, asked polite questions about her business, introduced her proudly to neighbors. But small moments began appearing like tiny cracks in glass. Amanda would spend an hour preparing dinner only for Grace to quietly add another version of the same meal beside it. Nobody commented on it. But somehow, Daniel always reached for Grace's dish first. Amanda told herself it did not matter. Then Daniel began consulting his mother before making decisions Amanda thought belonged to their marriage. Vacations, finances, furniture, even small things. Amanda would suggest something privately, only to hear Daniel repeat Grace's opinion later as though it had appeared naturally in his mind. At first Amanda tried harder. She smiled more, cooked more, worked less. She assumed marriage simply required adjustment. And adjustment slowly became disappearance. Her event planning business started shrinking without her fully noticing when it happened. She missed phone calls, delayed replies to clients, turned down opportunities because family dinners felt more important. Grace never told Amanda directly to stop working. She never had to. Every decision inside that house carried invisible pressure. One evening Amanda opened her laptop to answer emails and realized she had not booked a client in almost 6 months. She stared at the screen for a very long time. The silence in the room felt unfamiliar, like she was suddenly meeting herself again after years apart. Rebecca entered the family already suspicious. Unlike Amanda, she noticed the structure almost immediately. The way conversations shifted toward Grace. The way Daniel and his brothers checked their mother's reactions before making decisions. The way Amanda apologized constantly for things that did not require apologies. Rebecca believed she could resist it, and for a while she did. She asked direct questions. Why did Grace need to approve every holiday plan? Why were family decisions discussed privately between mother and sons before wives were included? Why did everyone behave carefully around one person? Rebecca expected disagreement. What she did not expect was guilt. Grace responded softly, painfully softly. She spoke about sacrifice, about widowhood, about loneliness, about everything she had done to hold the family together after tragedy. Suddenly, Rebecca no longer sounded reasonable. She sounded cruel. The emotional gravity inside that house always bent toward Grace. Every conflict somehow became proof that Grace was underappreciated. And Rebecca, who had once argued fearlessly inside courtrooms during law school, slowly began choosing silence simply because she became exhausted. One night she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, removing makeup after another uncomfortable dinner, and barely recognized her own expression. She looked tired. Not physically, internally, like someone constantly translating themselves into a softer version that fit more comfortably inside someone else's expectations. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And do not forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos on Fireside Tales. Lauren's transformation happened differently. Grace did not pressure Lauren. She embraced her. That made the shift almost impossible to recognize while it was happening. Lauren genuinely believed Grace understood her better than anyone else in the family. Grace remembered her favorite tea, complimented her outfits, defended her during disagreements. Sometimes Lauren would leave conversations with Grace feeling strangely emotional without fully understanding why. Grace had a remarkable ability to make people feel uniquely chosen. And once someone felt chosen, they became easier to shape. Lauren started changing small things first. Her routines, her opinions, the way she spoke. Grace disliked certain restaurants, so eventually Lauren stopped suggesting them. Grace believed family should spend every holiday together, so Lauren stopped visiting old friends during Christmas. Grace disapproved of certain parenting choices, so Lauren quietly adjusted hers too. Nothing was demanded, Everything was absorbed. One afternoon, Lauren caught herself repeating one of Grace's phrases during a conversation with Rebecca. The realization unsettled her more than she expected. It was not the sentence itself. It was the fact that for a brief moment, she sounded exactly like Grace. By then, the pattern inside the house felt permanent, predictable, stable, untouchable. And then Claire Whitmore walked through the front door carrying 2 suitcases and completely disrupted 20 years of emotional gravity. Claire was not louder than the others. That was the surprising part. She did not arrive confrontational. She did not challenge Grace directly. She did not make dramatic speeches about boundaries or independence. Instead, Claire possessed something Grace had never encountered before: internal steadiness. Before marriage, Claire had built her own consulting business from the ground up. She lived alone for years, managed her own finances, solved her own problems. She was warm without being easily influenced, respectful without needing approval. And because of that, the usual pressure inside the house never fully attached itself to her. Grace noticed immediately. The first moment happened over breakfast. Grace gently suggested a different arrangement for the kitchen. Claire smiled politely, then continued arranging things exactly the way she wanted. No argument, no apology, no emotional reaction, just quiet certainty. That unsettled Grace more than confrontation ever could. Confrontation created emotional energy Grace knew how to redirect. Claire offered nothing to redirect. She simply remained herself. When Grace corrected her cooking, Claire thanked her for the suggestion and kept cooking the same way. When Grace inserted herself into conversations, Claire calmly returned focus back to the original discussion. When subtle guilt entered the room, Claire acknowledged it without absorbing it. And slowly, something remarkable began happening. The other women noticed. Amanda noticed first. One afternoon, she watched Claire answer a client call while preparing dinner, moving confidently through the kitchen without shrinking herself to make anyone comfortable. The sight stirred something painful inside Amanda. Not jealousy, recognition. It reminded her of who she used to be. That evening, Amanda opened an old folder on her laptop filled with event photos from years earlier: wedding arches, birthday tables, flower arrangements. She stared at them until tears filled her eyes unexpectedly. Not because she missed the business, because she missed herself. Rebecca changed next. Claire's calm refusal to collapse emotionally during difficult conversations fascinated her. Rebecca had spent years believing survival inside the house required constant emotional management. Claire behaved as though another option existed. One night, Rebecca reopened legal documents she had not touched in years. The pages smelled faintly like old paper and dust. Her hands trembled slightly, turning them. Not from fear, from possibility. Lauren's realization arrived hardest. Because unlike Amanda and Rebecca, Lauren had willingly moved closer to Grace. She had mistaken emotional closeness for emotional safety. And once Claire entered the family, Lauren finally began noticing how often she monitored Grace's reactions before speaking. How many of her decisions were filtered unconsciously through Grace's approval. How much of herself had quietly disappeared beneath adaptation. The realization hurt, but it also woke her up. Grace saw all of this happening. Every subtle shift, every glance, every conversation ending differently than before. The household atmosphere changed slowly but unmistakably. The sons started making decisions without consulting her first. Amanda laughed more. Rebecca spoke more directly. Lauren spent weekends away from the house. Claire remained exactly the same. And perhaps that consistency frightened Grace most of all. Because for 20 years, every emotional current inside the family eventually flowed back toward her. Now, for the first time, people were beginning to move independently. Grace attempted her usual methods: gentle guilt, emotional reminders, carefully timed vulnerability. But Claire responded calmly every time. And because Claire remained calm, Everyone else slowly learned they could remain calm too. The turning point did not arrive through screaming. It arrived through movement. Amanda and Daniel moved first. Quietly. No dramatic announcement. No explosive argument. Just boxes carried carefully to a car on a gray Saturday morning. Amanda reopened her business within months. The first time she coordinated another wedding, she cried alone in her car afterward. Not because she was overwhelmed, because she felt alive again. Rebecca left next. She returned to legal work gradually, rebuilding confidence piece by piece. The first day she wore a blazer to work again, she stood in front of the mirror staring at herself almost in disbelief. Some parts of identity do not disappear permanently. They simply wait. Lauren's departure felt quietest, perhaps because she carried the most confusion. She loved Grace. That was the complicated part. None of this fit neatly into villain and victim. Grace had cared for them in many real ways. But care mixed with control eventually becomes suffocating. And Lauren finally understood that love should not require becoming smaller. Claire and Daniel remained last. Grace still believed, deep down, that Daniel would stay. After all, he always had. But one evening Claire and Daniel sat across from Grace in the living room and calmly explained they were leaving too. No anger, no accusations, just certainty. For the first time in decades, Grace had no emotional strategy ready. The room remained unbearably quiet. Daniel spoke carefully. He explained that leaving was not rejection. It was necessary. Claire sat beside him silently, grounded and calm exactly as she had been from the day she entered the house. And in that moment Grace finally understood something she had spent 20 years avoiding. Control and closeness are not the same thing. The house became quiet after they left. Painfully quiet. The routines remained. The furniture remained. The framed photographs remained. Everything still looked exactly the same. But emotionally, the house had changed completely. Grace still woke early. Still folded towels perfectly. Still prepared Sunday dinners. But now the dining room chairs remained empty longer. The silence inside the house no longer felt peaceful. Felt revealing. And perhaps that is the part of stories like this that lingers longest after the ending. Not anger, not revenge, not even the collapse itself, but the realization that people cannot be managed into loving you. Fear can create obedience. Guilt can create compliance. Habit can create routine. But none of those things create genuine closeness. Claire never defeated Grace through confrontation. She changed the household simply by refusing to disappear inside it. And once one person remembers they are allowed to remain fully themselves, other people begin remembering too. That was the true shift. Not rebellion. Recognition. Amanda recognized herself again. Rebecca recognized her strength again. Lauren recognized the difference between acceptance and dependence. And Grace, sitting alone in the house she spent 20 years shaping, was finally forced to recognize the cost of holding on too tightly for too long. Because in the end, what remained inside that house was not authority, not structure, not even control. It was silence. The kind of silence that arrives when people stop shrinking themselves to fit inside someone else's world. And maybe that is why stories like this stay with people. Because somewhere, in some version of this story, many people recognize a room they once lived inside. If this story made you reflect on someone, or even on yourself, take a moment and share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story meaningful, consider subscribing to Fireside Tales, where stories like this are told not just to be heard, but to be understood.